G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week, and thank you for all the support and people watching me every day. It does mean a lot. Now we have a lot to go over today. Of course, we need to look at what's happening in the north and the movements there and what people are saying. Then we'll have a look at the maps, as we have a lot of map updates in other regions, some of which may be ignored or looked over due to what's happening in the north. But just as important, as we know, if this is some deterrence to move troops away, then we need to keep an eye on what's happening in the south and the east of the country as well. We'll talk about potentially stretching Russia thin too. We'll talk about electronic warfare, look at drones, look at kill chains, all of this. But where we do need to start is we'll start up in the north, as this is where most people will be clicking on this video to talk about. Now, so here we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22 and the purple since 2014. Of course, the green is areas where Russia has been and has either withdrawn or been pushed back from Ukrainian offensive action. So where we're talking about is this Kharkiv Oblast, which borders then the Belgrade Oblast in Russia. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth here by both Ukrainian-backed forces and now Russian forces moving through here. And of course, this area sits close to this major city here of Kharkiv. One thing I will say with Kharkiv is I have seen some online bloggers talking about the population here. Now, any estimates on population here do not take that into account, as hundreds of thousands of people have left areas like this and have gone either into the west of Ukraine or have gone further beyond into the west. So again, population numbers here, we can't take that into account. Yes, a lot of people have come back, but the city, compared to what it was previously, don't take those into account. But what we do need to take into account is that this is, if I can get this going, is still fairly close to, this is not working, here we go, is, within 30 now, kilometers from where this offensive has gone. Now, what I'm seeing a lot of people saying today is the Russian offensive we've seen cross over here stalling? Has it slowed? What's going on? Especially when relating to Vovchansk. Now, this map here, I don't believe is near to updated of what we're seeing in Vovchansk, and I'll show you some geolocated footage specifically of this. But while we're talking of this area, we can see this checked red area is where Russia has moved over the past 24 hours into Holubok here, as well as this is suggesting a Ukrainian pushback of the Russians in Zeleny as well. So we can see that movement, as well as then a increase in grey zone then over on the eastern side here. But let's talk about Vovchansk. Well, has the advancement slowed? Well, everything would point at that it has to, because if you just look at the terrain here, you've got minor villages and areas, open flat terrain, and then Vovchansk is the first area of built up street, town, city in here. So of course this is going to slow down in here. More of the primary concern should be here is, how did Russia get within 72 hours through this amount of area? So let's talk minimum, say 5 Ks, and we'll look at some geolocations to prove this as well, through defensive works. There should have been defensive works that sit between the border and Vovchansk. Yes, those defensive works are not going to sit right on that border. That makes sense. But you have them before major areas like this. And obviously those have been bypassed, and what we spoke about in yesterday's video was some of them not made anywhere near to the standard or completion they should have been, which now we're saying Ukraine reporting up to about 6,000 people are now being evacuated from these areas under fire. So yeah, we continue to see this now still limited push in. And why I call it limited, and we'll look at what Sarah Ashton-Cirillo says later, is I haven't seen evidence of strikes, whether from Ukrainian drones or whether Russian stuff firing, of much armor movement at all, or huge troop masses. Like I spoke about yesterday, the troops that I've seen getting targeted by Ukrainian drones and whatever have been wearing like 72-hour packs. This still means that, in my eyes, it is limited troop movements. Yeah, probably still a lot, but have moved in a long way on foot with then artillery support, which again is concerning given how much ground has actually been made. That ties back into the complaints from Ukrainian soldiers about those insufficient then defensive works. And what we have seen is then the commander here then sacked as well. So Ukraine replaces commander for northeastern Kharkiv. The Ukrainian commander responsible for the northeastern Kharkiv was replaced during the Russian offensive, the military commander said, and no reason has been given. But that ties into, I think, what we are looking at. Now, let's talk about Vovchansk, and we will line up these maps in a second. So some of the footage we have here is then we have this BTR-82 here being operated by the RDK. So the Ukrainian-backed forces that we have seen cross into Belgrade and Kursk. So we can see this here then firing on positions in still built-up areas. And this is in Vovchansk. Now, they have shown some drone footage as well. Of course, I can't show it on here, where it appears to show 5 Russian soldiers being killed, but also in and around this same area. Now, where is this then geolocated to? It is geolocated to then just on this road here in Vovchansk. So what we can say is in that built-up area, fighting and firing from there, and if we look at where these roads turn out, we're talking right in this area around here, that Russia has definitely reached the outskirts here of Vovchansk. Therefore, whatever defensive works are pre that have then been bypassed. Now, the next one we'll look at is another geolocation, but we'll stay in this front at the moment. Now, we have this as well from the head of the Kharkiv Regional Police. It said Vovchansk in the Kharkiv region is in a sense turning into a Bakhmut or Mariinka. The number of Russian FABs, those are the glide bombs, that arrive in the city is simply off the scale. So what we do know is a heap of FABs and a heap of artillery will go into these areas to soften up whatever is there before Russia then commits more assets to that front. We haven't actually seen that many assets yet committed. Now, I'm not saying that hasn't been, but from the strikes we have seen, from the limited footage coming out, we haven't yet seen that much. So let's have a comparison of the maps. So we do have some NOEL reports and Syriac maps here. Now, NOEL reports, let's have a look at this. Now, this is lining up fairly closely, but is showing a lot more on this very outskirt of Vovchansk here, filling in this area in here. Further, to my eye, confirming this push. Also showing that on the eastern side here, this has pushed right down into the outskirts and taken some positions of this Buravka here as well. So showing far different from what we see then on the deep state map. So we also have 3 Syriac map updates to talk about, and we'll stick on this eastern part over here. So we can see that this is then Vovchansk here, and this push in, this initial break-in of where that geolocated footage does show, but a lot more pushing on the far eastern side of this as well, judging from what the Syriac is saying. We'll talk about that west in a second. Now, furthermore, we have the second map update here showing a fill-in of this position in between, further then on the outskirts of Vovchansk, filling in those positions up into what we are seeing there. And then we have a greater zoom out map of just here. Now, what we can see is a further push of a few more blocks into Vovchansk, into the first, say, third of Vovchansk by the Russian forces here too. Now, this ties into what I was saying about, of course, we're going to see a slowdown of movements from when you're moving in a paddock to when you're moving then in a built-up city. Anyway, that doesn't mean that everything has then stalled. What we see down here in this Buravka, this is lining up very, very similarly to what then NOEL reports map shows us down in his circle here as well. Maybe even less. So we do know there has been some push out there. What neither map is showing us is this controlled Russian on the western side of this eastern push that is said to be over in this direction here. Neither NOEL reports or Syriac is showing this. See where this border curves up? It's saying down in this area here. So again, not particularly sure. This is why we have multiple maps to then show you. But this front line, it is heating up, and we will get more and more of an idea of what is happening here over the coming few days, maybe weeks. But from the Chuv axis, Russian forces approached this Buravka, so down in this region. Troops continue advancing inside Vovchansk, taking positions north of then that street. So I hope that more geolocated footage will actually come out and give us a better idea of specifically what is happening down on that exact front. Now let's go over to then, we can see a Ukrainian push back, a Russian push down, and let's have a look at how deep this is at the moment. We're talking 6.5 kilometers. So this is still a major push in, regardless of wherever you sit on the bias of this. If this was your side doing it, you would say it was major. And there are some very big concerns, great concerns about how this has then occurred. Now, we see this Ukrainian pushback in Zeleny on then the pro-Ukrainian map here. Let's have a look at Noel reports. Now, he is showing that this was a Russian advance down here near Zeleny, which is more lining up to what the map then showed yesterday. So again, we're not 100% sure, and it's not showing this push out near Haliboki as well. So again, hard to sort of read into where these maps are sitting, because we do know down in here, there's been then a Russian flag go up, and I'll show you exactly where that is. So Haliboki here. So we see this turn down to the south, see this intersection. We're talking this intersection here. So we know that Noah Reports map hasn't then got that in. And we then see this geolocated to here of where that flag, the Russian flag, was then raised. That is then backed up through Deep State map as well. That the flag, but the flag has been hung here. So yesterday's battle, the enemy managed to capture either the entire village or its main part. So has been some capturing of territory there. Now, let's then try and line up these maps on this sort of easterly push that we see here. Now, again, we're going to be looking at 3 Syriac maps, but show you the movement that he said through the day. So we see this map here pushing on Holoboki, as well as Lukansky here, as well as this Zeleny push. This is the first map. Second map, we see a large expansion of control down around the far east to the south of here as well, taking full control over that. No changes down here near Zeleny. So between those two, and then actually have the last one here blown up. We see no change down in Zeleny, so not showing that Ukrainian push back, but a further expansion just down here, what will be then this village here. So further Russian expansion showing a fair bit more on some areas, but similar on others of these then 2 different maps. So again, the reason we show you that is not to confuse you, not to confuse myself, but to give you an idea of where the different reporting is. Now, we have a couple of official statements here. So we have Sarah saying this.
I'm on a farm right now in formerly occupied part of Kharkiv Oblast, and I can tell you all these discussion that it is a major offensive taking place on the border zone between Ukraine and Russia and Kharkiv Oblast is clickbait.
So saying that anything about a major offensive here is clickbait. What we do know is there's been well over 100 square kilometers got, and, you know, say 10 areas and fights within major towns as well in the Kharkiv Oblast. So we can say that there is definitely an offensive going on there. The bit that I will say is I still believe this isn't the main offensive push. If there is 50, 60, 70,000 troops built up in here, we definitely haven't seen that many cross, as well as we haven't seen the amount of armor we would expect to cross either. So I can see where that point was made, but I will say I'll definitely disagree that there isn't a successful offensive going on here.
Some troops were sent in. Troops have been repelled by the Ukrainian Defense Forces. We have inflicted significant damage.
So we know the troops haven't been repelled, as even the MOD map here is showing further pushes over then the last 24 hours here.
On the Russian incursion. To call it an invasion, to call it a major offensive is simply a lie. The understanding is that the Russians tried to come in and basically make noise. They're killing civilians. What the Russians are engaged in is not any sort of military campaign. It's terrorism. And under President Zelensky, under Colonel General Syrskyi, under our special forces, and every Ukrainian defender, that is stepping up to push the Russians back. They will be pushed back, and they are being pushed back in Kharkiv Oblast.
So what I will say is, from the maps we're seeing, they're not being pushed back in here. And is it military? Yeah, because the tactic here is to move troops from other locations up into here. That's what we presume, to then stretch Ukrainians' lines more thinly, as well as if an opportunity does open up for Russia to take more territory in here, then I think they will then push that this could become the main axis. So I think the plan A for Russia is to try and alleviate the pressure down in these other areas by movement of troops. But if they have a lot of success in here, then their plan B will be, okay, well, let's actually try and push on here and see where we can get to in these areas which have been formerly occupied before. And this is similar to then what Zelensky is saying, that our force continue to counter Russian attacks in Kharkiv region. The direction has been reinforced and the results are proving. At the same time, we clearly see the enemy acts and their intent to stretch our forces thin. Clearly, we do not divert the necessary assistance and provision from Donetsk directions. So, hinting at that it is reserve soldiers, they're not pulling anyone away from that. What I do question is, how many reserves does Ukraine actually have? We know they've got manpower, mobilization issues, and I can't believe yet that Ukraine hasn't announced new mobilization and mass mobilizations yet, that every day it passes that's not happening is a day somewhere down the line of a day of training missed or a day of then deployment missed as well. So some interesting takes there, but is this a full-on offensive across here? No, I agree with that, because I think if the Ukrainian and Western reporting that there's 50,000 soldiers built up in here, and all the armor, all the whatever, we haven't yet seen that much take place here. But the concerning part is, from the recon elements that have crossed, is how successful those have been so far. Now, I want to talk about something else up in this area too. So we see many officials saying that we will see F-16s in Ukraine within a month or within a few weeks. Now, this north area, we've spoken about this in length. This is where the F-16s will likely be the least effective. Now, for modern fighter aircraft and effectiveness, the best way, when they're performing the best, is in support of other assets, both air defense and, of course, AWACS aircraft, the ones with the big dish on the top of them that just act as a further better set of eyes and sensors in the sky, airborne early warning. But of course, we know these are supplying a hell of a lot of information into Ukraine when they're flying over Poland, through Romania, any areas like this within NATO, as well as out over then, of course, the Black Sea. Now, the range on these, of course, is highly, highly classified. But let's take into account, let's just say it's 500 kilometers, and that is being generous, from something, say, like a what are they called? Wedge tail. So we're talking down around Crimea and these areas in Odessa, and this is where we think they'll be the most effective. Now, the area of which is going to be most dangerous for them is, of course, up somewhere like here. And it is going to be even further difficult because the occupied territory is not as deep up here. So, of course, all the air defense can sit within Russian territory. Therefore, from what we've seen, the F-16s may not actually be able to conduct suppression and destruction of air defense, typically SEAD and DEED. And like in occupied territory, where, yeah, you'll be able to hit systems in here in Crimea, we still question, will they be actually allowed to hit areas within Russia, where we've got such a shallow occupied area, far away from any other supporting elements, is probably going to be the least effective location for these, so may see more success there too. But that does tie into where people are saying, well, it may draw Russian soldiers away too if they're having success in here in some 4, 5, 6-dimensional chess game. And this all ties in with recent comments today said about the closing the airspace thing again. This is not going to happen. And this was from Germany saying this today. Closing the airspace is, I get a good message to close the airspace over Ukraine, as Russia has the air advantage and has had for now over 2 years. Problem is, to conduct SEAD and DEED within Ukraine and close the airspace, it's not flicking a switch. It is NATO fighter aircraft not only targeting Russian systems within Ukraine, it is targeting systems in Russia as well. S3, 4, 500 have a lot of range. And I don't see that NATO has been or is going to be prepared to do that. So the closing the airspace message, I understand. Realistically, no. Now, something else I need to speak about up in the north here that I don't see mentioned by anyone, and I think I can speak on this as I have spent a lot of time in Kharkiv, both pre-22 invasion and post-22 invasion, and just following along as the Ukrainian offensive was pushing through here as well. If you're interested in those videos, go back to my 2022 on-the-ground videos here. Now, what is not being spoke about is there is a large amount of pro-Russian people living in and around this area. And this did make working here more difficult and more dangerous. And a lot of the areas of which we were working in, we were told by the police and the military that the civilian population left in some of these areas will be actively working against Ukraine and to be very careful of where you go, and areas of which they wouldn't go due to partisans working for Russia in here. You can't discount, because I know it's being accounted for in command issues, that is also a factor operating in here. And it's going to be a much, much larger factor if we ever see Ukraine push down into Crimea or into Donetsk as well. So that's just my overview of everything up in the north. I know that is a lot belt fed into you on a Tuesday afternoon or morning or wherever you then see my videos. So let's then have a look at these maps. Now, we do have a fair bit to go over on this map. So let's zoom back out. We'll come down. Let's go Bakhmut straight off the bat. We're not seeing any change on this map now for a couple of days, but we did see this major push out from Ivanovsky, and we said that this gap down here was likely closed. We do have a couple of map updates in here today from Syriac. Now, he shows that this down in here has been closed. Tactically, strategically, let's just say that that is closed. This grey zone would be a death trap if you're in there, but it does show down the railway line here. So just out of here, more territory being made, say, to the apex of this turn up in here, trying to then have that break-in into Chasiv Yar, which we have seen initially did fail. Now, we have a little bit more footage in the same sort of area. So this is the train line, and then just south of here, along this road of life from Kromove, which you'll be familiar with, into then Chasiv Yar micro-district. So the footage is here. Southeast of Chasiv Yar, Russian army restarted the assault into Canal micro-district from the east. In addition, troops continue advancing from the north along the railway. So trying to get a foothold somewhere here into Bakhmut, into Chasiv Yar. This is a very, very important area, not to be understated, due to the territory here and the roads that lead into Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. And of course, we'll then put more pressure on this New York Zalizne front between Avdiivka and Bakhmut then as well. So let's come down into Avdiivka and see what we're seeing here. Now, we said yesterday, I believe, or the day before, this gap around Pervomayski is likely closed up just due to the depth of that grey zone out towards Nevelsky, trying to close up this front. And this map then shows this today. Now, I think I have 3 map updates in here. So this is on the Semenivka front. So just in here, where yesterday, if we can go back, we then see, oh, sorry, wrong one. We see this. So we see this, but further along, but in the same general direction, out from Orlivka and Semenivka here from Syriac maps, further closing up in this territory there that we did know and did have confirmation off the front would be a very difficult place to move through from some of my contacts. Then we have then the second update here. Now, this is then operating this Netelyovi front. So down in here, this is what we spoke about the other day of Russia. This open ground here could be a death trap. So we will try and see a push through Novoporovsky, Netelyovi, Kharlivka to try and then close it up. And we know that is the tactics being used successfully by Russia in Bakhmut, in Mariupol, in Avdiivka, to have those sort of arms go out and then engulf something. During the last 3 days, Russian army took full control over the center of Netelyovi, thus moving the combats to the last 2 streets of the locality. So pushing down here, and the next goal will be Kharlivka following then that, if that is then successful. Now we'll come just up into the north around this Osheretne front, which is showing different. This is shown closed up across here. Given that there is a waterway through here that could act as a natural barrier, I would say that this is closed up here and the Ukraine has gone into defense across here. Now, let's have a look. So just out of Osheretne, down in here, this is this paddock here, has shown that there has been a shift and advancement there, further expanding that control of Osheretne. Therefore, minimizing the risk of then that being further cut off. Now, one thing that we did see a few days ago on this map, we'll come up into Krasnoyarivka, we did see this movement just in here. I reckon maybe 3 days ago, we did see that movement right here. This has now been actually confirmed by Syriac map, which is always nice, showing very similar area. For the first time in months, the Russian army made new advances north of here, taking control over some trenches in the quarry. So very interesting to see that movement as well, backed up by the Ukrainian map. So we know that occurred. Krasnoyarivka, this map is still behind, but instead of a few kilometers behind, it is now maybe in the tens, hundreds of meters behind, but showing more Russian control just out from the industrial area around this major roundabout here. Now, we'll just come down south a little bit, and we're into now the southern front, and this Uruzani front, Starmorsky. This is where Ukraine had its offensive push. Now, we can see that Russia is trying to work to regain this territory then taken through here. And if we step back over the last few days, few weeks, we can see that they have successfully taken more ground up through this area here. Yes, it's been back and forth a little bit, but overall have made a net positive change for them in amount of ground. Now we come down into the Robotny front, where we have spoken about a lot, and we believe this is still behind, but from yesterday that Russia has got back parts of the Surovikin line which were broken through, and it was Ukraine's breakthrough of that line in that locality in their 2023 offensive, and we saw that yesterday. Now we're seeing just a push out in this direction, which is the same spot we actually saw a few days ago from Syriac there too. So very interesting to see. These are the only map updates we have. Now, there is talk that this island has been retaken by Russia. That said, I haven't seen any confirmation on that. But as far as the maps, that is all we have today. Now, Zelensky has fired another senior member as well. This is where I mentioned yesterday. Yes, we saw Shoigu has moved positions within senior Russian command, but we have seen Ukraine change so many positions around. And again, no different. On May 13th, Zelensky signed a decree for this bloke, the first deputy chief of Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service. Then it is given no reason for his dismissal and has been replaced. He was the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine, known as the SZRU, collects intelligence on political, economic, military, and scientific and technical spheres. So major shifts happening. Even today, we had 2 people from Kharkiv, and then that bloke then replaced. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is Russia's kill chain has been vastly improved, and we see this no different to here. So we see 12 drones, Ukrainian drones, out in the open here, with 2 then pickup trucks being struck by Russia. Now, this is struck by a Tornado S airburst round here. So what we can see, zoom in on this, we can see people there. People have claimed this was a decoy. You don't have decoys that move around and people stand around them. The whole point of a decoy is to be hit. We can see that burst go off there. One thing we will say in this is it does seem like those vehicles weren't present or have moved during this. Drones, very light thing. Airburst cluster will be the best way to take out something like that, put holes and shrapnel all through things. And we can see where it is now burning up. Now, what we have spoken about before and has been confirmed by Russia is the kill chain as far as finding a target, lasing the target if it's using a type of drone that can use a laser designator to strike on target has improved greatly. That is far, far faster. And Ukraine need to adapt to this speed and can't have things out in the open like that. When we see that ISR increase capability from seeing it to hitting it, from the choppers down in Zap to this, that is leaking in, and that is becoming more of a problem as Russia has closed up that time on target, as well as the effectiveness of using laser designators. Now, that system, that Tornado S, as well as the Iskander, if you read online, isn't a laser-guided system. We can use a laser designator. Now, me and a few other guys have speculated that has there been an upgrade where that is then being used similar for like the Krasnopol round, where the drone lasers something, paints it with its laser, and the Krasnopol round hits it, which we have seen a lot of success in doing. Now, Krasnoyarivka, where we spoke about down in here, this is where we've seen the Blyatmobiles, where we know that Russia was having the hardest time breaking in, and we can see one that has been then taken out here. We don't know the fate of the crew, but we get a better idea of what is inside. So yeah, thicker metal, but it's not that thick. But what this bar armor and this steel will do is it will set off, pre-ignite the shaped charges that are hitting it, and this gives a hell of a lot more survivability to then the tank's armor. Works the exact same as bar armor on vehicles, say in Afghanistan, going up against RPGs. Now, what we can see here is these antennas across here, and potentially ones here as well. That what we do know is on the top of the hull, on the turret in here, typically sits electronic warfare systems, and this to me would be the emitters of those. So these are why these have been effective. Heaps of electronic warfare equipment, what is very sensitive, but is protected by this steel in here, moving in for extra protection. It just gives us a better idea of exactly maybe what we are seeing on those. Now, what we want to talk about is the effort to maybe stretch Russia's forces thin as well. Now, let me just bring up a normal Google Earth map here. So, of course, we see Russia is a very, very large country, largest mass on Earth. But the problem with this can be, well, you need soldiers way out here somewhere as well, protecting areas. But large border with Finland as well as Norway, of course, Finland, Sweden, most recent NATO countries, as well as there is a dispute over the islands that sit down here from Japan as well, these Kuril Islands. Now, I always love the fact that you could actually walk from America. So this is up here is Alaska to Russia in the right time of year. You have little and, oh my God, I can't zoom in, little and big Diomede islands in here that freeze between, and you could walk from west to Russia, which I just find interesting. But regardless, we need to talk about this. And I've been getting told a little bit of this, that we are trying to stretch Russia a little bit thin on these fronts as well by making them redeploy soldiers up to other borders, similar to what we're seeing down then in the north. So we have things like this, and I can't find too much on this, but several hundred US soldiers and military vehicles moved from Narvik to Finland through northern Sweden for immediate response 24. But this is like an exercise going on from northern Norway to Finland, so northern Norway through to Finland, through Sweden, so up in Lapland here somewhere. Several hundred US vehicles and containers arrived in the port of Narvik, northern Norway, Arc Integrity. So 1,600 soldiers, blah, 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 but having exercises up in here. Now, what this does is, of course, there's still contested, well, when I say contested, politically contested bits of ground that sit between Russia and Finland here, and putting soldiers and running exercises here, Russia will then have to deploy more soldiers up into these regions. That takes away where soldiers potentially could be mobilized to sent down to Ukraine. And then if we step then onto the deployment map, this shows the same. So up northern Finland area, up in here in the north of Russia, we can see a deployment of Russian troops up here too. Now, what we do know is Russia does mobilize and conscript a number of soldiers then every year, and that these conscripted soldiers typically don't go to frontline duty straight away in Ukraine, that they go into garrison duties up in here and all over the country as well. Now, what we do know as well, there is still land that sits, that Japan will say is theirs, Russia will say is theirs, regardless. It's been back and forward for a long time on these Kuril Islands in here, where we can see that as well. Russia has major deployments of units down in here as well, a hell of a long way from where Ukraine sits over here. That still has deployment. And what I'm being told is the more and more build up in here is drawing forces away and stretching Russia more thinly, and we get a better idea of maybe then what the map will show us just here too. And US and Japan strengthen military ties as they eye China. That Japan and the United States will talk to boost military cooperation, growing threat of China. Of course, in that region, China is then the largest threat. But still, this can all be used as a larger scale. There are two things I did forget to mention about Finland is, since Finland has joined NATO, the US has gained access to said to be 15 bases and deployed somewhere overall around 5,000 soldiers. So this could be part of the bigger plan in here too, to try and do what Russia's doing to Ukraine by stretching the thing, to try and stretch Russia a bit more thinly here too. That comes with having such a large country to protect. You've got such a large country to protect. Now, legends, look after yourselves. Hope you have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.